After this is sat overnight and everything is completely dry, you're ready to first take off your salt and then take your tape off. So to take off the salt, you're just gonna kind of take your finger and go like this. You might have to use your fingernail. All right, don't let the salt go all over the floor. Sweep it into like a trash can or something. Now you're ready to remove your tape. Very carefully. You can still rip your paper, so you want to just be super slow and careful about this. Ta-da! All right, now we're ready to start adding all the rest of the detail. Let's start with your big tree that's in the foreground. So the first thing is to decide if this is going to be an aspen or a brown tree. I do want it kind of to be some sort of deciduous tree, which means leafy. So I think I'm going to make this one a brown tree, so it'll be something like a maple or an oak tree. So I'm going to mix up a brown color. Maybe I'll use this color left over from my mountains and just kind of add brown to it. That might look kind of nice. A purpley brown. You can mix whatever kind of brown you want. The color will look good with your color scheme for the season. But mine's summery, so okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to decide which side the sun is shining. And I'm going to make one side slightly darker and one side slightly lighter. So I'm going to kind of pretend the sun is coming from this direction. That means it's shining this way. And so for each big limb, this side will be lighter and that side will be darker. So I'm going to start out by putting, actually I'm just going to cover the whole base to start. Instead of keeping it the perfect edge of the tape, I'm going to just kind of fan the base so it's a little wider and do a little bit of jaggedy looking roots that show a little bit above the ground. And then I'm going to flip my paintbrush over and draw in some bark texture. Yeah, you might want to do this just one chunk of it at a time instead of the whole thing like I just did. Okay, now I'll do my next area. After you have your base, then you're going to go back. You're going to mix a slightly darker shade of the same color. So I'm going to just mix a little, I could mix like a dark purple, or maybe I'll mix a little bit of brown and blue in with this color. That got very blue. Okay, and then I'm going to put it down one side on the whichever side I decided is going to be the shadowy side. Okay. Now you are ready to do all your branches. So I have to mix my color again. So I would start with some big, thicker branches and then do littler ones on top of that. So I would think about these as your big 2 branches and go about halfway down and maybe just draw some big, thick branches that go kind of right off the page that are a similar thickness to these. Okay? And then off of these, you'll do some smaller ones. Notice how I'm not pressing my paintbrush hard. Remember, the metal should never be touching. And I'm pressing a little bit harder to start, and I'm lifting my paintbrush up so that it ends in a point. Okay, and then I'll do just a few really tiny ones with just the very point of my paintbrush kind of off of these. Now we'll let that dry before I show you how to do leaves. We are ready to add all our extra details like rocks and grass and flowers if you want, and leaves if you want, and extra trees. Before we start that, I want to show you one little editing thing. I'm going to be looking for you to have no thick spots of paint. So right here, for example, my paint as it was drying sort of puddled and got thick. And so notice how it's like a little bit shiny and just really stands out as darker than the rest of the paint. And I don't really want that. So to get rid of it, you are going to put some water, not a ton, on it to just kind of rehydrate it. And then you're going to take a little piece of paper towel and just kind of soak it up. And you can do that several times. Okay, so actually look, that took almost all the paint off. And so I'm going to just kind of put some water on it to blend out that spot with the colors next to it. First, let's do any other trees that we're going to have. So remember, we're going to use the dry brush technique for trees. So first you want to paint whatever color you want them to be. And I would do at least 2 layers of colors, a lighter and first probably, and then a darker. So maybe I'll make my trees, maybe like I'll use this kind of grayish blue purple, and then also I'll make a darker green. Okay, I made it really brownish. Okay, so I'm going to squeeze as much paint as I can off so I don't lose it. And then I'm going to dry my brush really well. Okay, and I'm going to spread my bristles out and get the paint just on the tip of the bristles. And then I have to think about the heights, right? So if the bottom of the tree is lower on the page, that means it's taller. If the bottom were right next to the bottom of this one, which you probably don't have room to do that, it would be very tall. You know, think about a pine tree next to like an oak. What would their size differences be? I think I'm gonna do maybe some that are kind of right here on the third of the page. That way I've divided my page into thirds. So I'll have one, I'll have the top way up there, and then the bottom I'll kind of go all the way down here next to the river. Make sure you don't accidentally float your tree in the middle of the river. Okay, then I'll plan where I want the bottom to be. This will be skinny. And then you just do up and down motions. To show your tree. I think I'll do 2 trees right next to each other overlapping. I think that would look kind of nice. And then I'll do my second layer. And you can always let it dry and then do another layer if it's not getting dark enough. Like mine is a little more see-through than I'd like right in front of the river. Okay, now I'm going to do some trees kind of on the horizon line, And with this, I'll just kind of like do some dots in a triangle shape instead of doing the trunk first. So I'll just kind of do my brush in two different angles, like the sides of the triangle and then the bottom. And you can always switch to the smaller brush if you need to. But trees in the distance, you don't really see much detail. They just look kind of blobby, general triangle shapes. Maybe over here, I'll have, these will just be kind of trees. Maybe there should be like part of a tree over here for balance. This one can be like going off the side of the page. All right, next we are going to do some grass. So I would switch to your tiny brush. And first you're gonna mix the colors you want for your grass. So I'm gonna mix some browns and greens since mine's like a late summer. And you can definitely use other colors you've mixed. Maybe I'll make like a yellowy green also. Okay, now I'm drying my brush off because I'm going to use the dry brush technique, and I'm only putting the color on the tip. And then I'm going to hold my brush straight up and down, and I'm going to just kind of flick it upwards. So remember, you're paying attention to how tall your grass is, and I would recommend putting grass kind of near the base of things. So like by this tree, it'll be a little bit taller since this is down in front. And you can overlap it in front of the tree, that's okay. Okay, as they get further away, my grasses are getting a little shorter. And then you wouldn't even see grass really towards in the background. It's really only the foreground and the middle ground that you show some grasses. And that's tall grasses. Short mowed grass wouldn't even show in the middle ground really. Okay, that's one color, and then you're going to do another color. Now let's do a few rocks. So mix up kind of like just a grayish color. And then just in a few spots you're going to do a horizontal line and then just kind of a little bump on top. And you won't even show rocks really in the middle ground, it's more just kind of here in the foreground that you would show them. To add flowers, I'm going to do some like bright reddish orange flowers, I think. You're just going to do dots, kind of, just little blobby dots in the foreground on top of the, kind of floating in with the grass. You don't want it to be everywhere, just kind of pick a few areas where you want there to be flowers. And usually wildflowers are like yellows or purples and blues or oranges. Maybe I'll do some yellow ones too. If you do choose to do yellow, I would recommend mixing a little white in with it. And that'll help it sit on top of the darker colors a little better. Generally though, you don't really use white with watercolor. Have you noticed we haven't used the white? Leaves are very similar to kind of like flowers and pine trees, where you don't want to draw individual leaves, you just kind of want to show the general blobby shape. So I'm again going to use dry brush for the leaves, and I'm going to use probably a similar green. So mix up your color you want to use. Maybe I'll use like a light green and a dark green. And then you're going to spread your brush out so it's in a fan. And then you don't want to put leaves near the trunk area, right? Or the thicker branches. If you think about it, leaves only grow on the smaller branches generally. So I'm just going to kind of do some blobby shapes in front of those smaller branches. And lastly, I'm going to add some cattails. That's up to you if you want to do it or not. Just I'm going to do kind of brown ovals on top of some of the grasses over here by the water. Okay, and then you decide when you're done. Step back, look at it from far away, see if it is missing any little details, and you'll decide when you're done.